Major depressive disorder. You've been sad before. Everyone has. So you assume you know what depression feels like. You don't. Major depressive disorder is the one most people picture when they hear the word, and it's still nothing like ordinary sadness. Sadness has a reason and an expiry date. This doesn't. To qualify, you need at least 2 weeks of either a flattened mood or the total loss of pleasure in things you used to love, plus a stack of other symptoms. Sleep falls apart, appetite swings, concentration evaporates. Your own body starts to feel heavy. The cruel part is what it does to motivation. The illness that needs you to get help is the same illness that strips away your ability to want anything at all. It comes in episodes, which sounds like good news. It's not. Most people who have one will have another. Each episode makes the next one more likely. This is the baseline. Everything else on this list is a variation on the theme. Persistent depressive disorder. Some people aren't having a depressive episode, they just live there. Persistent depressive disorder, once called dysthymia, is depression that moves in and refuses to leave. Not the dramatic, can't get out of bed kind, the low, gray, functional kind that lasts at least 2 years and often much longer. Here's what makes it sneaky. The symptoms are usually milder than major depression, so people don't recognize it as illness. They just think this is their personality. Low energy, low self-worth. A baseline of flat. For years, that's the trap. You can't see a problem you've never lived without. People with PDD often go their whole lives assuming everyone feels this hollow and just hides it better. And it gets worse. You can have a major depressive episode land on top of the persistent one. Clinicians call it double depression, which is exactly as fun as it sounds. The saddest part isn't the intensity, it's the duration. This is a person who forgot what normal feels like. Bipolar depression. This is the type that gets people hurt by the wrong prescription. Bipolar depression looks identical to major depression from the outside. Same flat mood, same exhaustion, same despair. The difference is what it's attached to. In bipolar disorder, the lows alternate with highs, periods of mania or hypomania where mood, energy, and impulsivity spike. Here's the problem. People usually seek help during the lows because the highs can feel great. So they describe the depression, get diagnosed with regular depression, and get handed an antidepressant. That's where it can go wrong. Antidepressants alone, without a mood stabilizer, can tip a bipolar brain straight into mania. The treatment for one depression becomes a trigger for another. This is why a good clinician asks about your best moods, not just your worst ones. The question that matters isn't how low you've been, it's how high. Get the diagnosis wrong, and the medicine makes everything worse. Get it right, and it's manageable. The whole outcome hinges on one missed question. Seasonal affective disorder. Every winter, millions of people watch their personality drain out through their eyes, and they blame themselves for it. Seasonal affective disorder is depression on a schedule. It arrives as the days get shorter, usually late autumn, and lifts when the light comes back in spring. Same symptoms as major depression, just tied to the calendar. The mechanism is light. Less daylight throws off your circadian rhythm and your brain's balance of serotonin and melatonin. Your internal clock loses the signal it needs to run properly, and your mood goes down with it. Here's the part that messes with people. Because it lifts every spring, it feels like a mood, not an illness. So nobody treats it. They just write off 3 or 4 months of every year as a bad stretch. There's a rarer summer version too, which flips the whole thing around. The fix is almost insultingly simple for some people. A bright light box every morning, you're treating a brain that's starving for a sunrise. Postpartum depression, everyone expects a new mother to be exhausted. Nobody warns her she might feel nothing at all. Postpartum depression is not the baby blues. The baby blues are the teary, overwhelmed days right after birth, and they pass on their own within a couple of weeks. This doesn't pass. It's a full depressive episode, and it can hit any time in the first year. The trigger is partly chemical. After delivery, hormones that were sky high for 9 months crash through the floor in days. Add no sleep, a body in recovery, and total responsibility for a tiny human, and the brain can buckle. Here's the cruel layer. The illness comes wrapped in guilt. You're supposed to be glowing. Instead, you feel detached, or hopeless, or like you've made a terrible mistake. So you say nothing because admitting it feels like failing as a parent. It affects around 1 in 7 mothers, and it doesn't only hit mothers. New fathers get it too. Nobody warns them either. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Call this PMS and you've already misunderstood it. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder is what happens when the week before a period stops being an inconvenience and becomes a genuine psychiatric event. Severe depression, irritability, anxiety, and mood swings that show up in the days before bleeding, then vanish almost completely once it starts. That's the strange part. The symptoms are brutal and then they're just gone on a clockwork cycle every single month. Here's what's actually happening. It's not that hormone levels are abnormal, it's that the brain is abnormally sensitive to the normal rise and fall. The same hormonal shift that barely registers for most people sends this brain into a tailspin, which is exactly why it gets dismissed. Tests come back normal, so people get told it's in their head. It is in their head. That's the whole point. The reaction is happening in the brain, not the blood work. For some, it's a few rough days. For others, it's the worst week of every month, on repeat, for decades. Atypical depression. The name is a lie. There's nothing rare about it. Atypical depression got its label decades ago to describe symptoms that didn't fit the classic picture. The irony is that it's one of the most common forms there is. The name just stuck. Here's how it breaks the mold. In most depression, nothing brings you pleasure. In atypical depression, mood reactivity survives. Something good happens, and you genuinely feel better, briefly, before it drops again. That false dawn is the signature. The rest flips the script too. Instead of insomnia and lost appetite, you get the opposite. Sleeping too much, eating too much, a heavy, leaden feeling in your arms and legs, like you're moving through wet cement. Then there's the rejection sensitivity. A short reply, a look, a perceived slight can wreck an entire day. The radar for rejection is cranked all the way up. So you can laugh at a joke and still be deeply unwell, which is exactly why the people around you keep missing it. Melancholic depression. If depression had a purest form, this would be it. Melancholic depression is the heavy, biological, old-fashioned kind that the word originally meant. Not sadness, the complete absence of pleasure. Nothing reaches you, not good news, not your favorite food, not the people you love. The system that registers joy just goes offline. It runs on a schedule inside the day. Mornings are the worst, and people wake hours too early, often around 3 or 4 a.m., and lie there in it. By evening, it eases slightly, which is the exact opposite of how a normal bad mood behaves. The body shows it too. Noticeable weight loss, slowed movement and speech, a crushing specific guilt that doesn't attach to anything real. Here's the part that matters. This type leans more on your biology than your circumstances. You can have a good life and a loving family and still be flattened by it. That's what makes it so isolating. There's nothing to point at. It just arrives. Psychotic depression. This is where depression stops lying quietly and starts inventing things. Psychotic depression is a severe depressive episode with hallucinations or delusions bolted on, and they're not random. They almost always match the despair. Voices that tell you you're worthless. An unshakable conviction that you're guilty of something terrible, or that you're dying, or that you're already ruined. That's what makes it so dangerous. The depression builds a case against you, and then the psychosis supplies fake evidence to prove it. The illness becomes self-confirming. People often hide the psychotic part because they know how it sounds, so they get treated for ordinary depression while something far more serious runs underneath. Here's the catch. Standard antidepressants alone usually aren't enough. It typically needs an antidepressant and an antipsychotic together, and in severe cases, ECT works faster than anything else. It's one of the most serious forms on this list, and it's the one people are most afraid to say out loud. Catatonic depression. Sometimes depression doesn't slow a person down, it switches them off. Catatonic depression is a depressive episode with catatonia, a disturbance of movement and responsiveness that looks almost impossible until you see it. The person may go completely still and silent for hours. They might hold a strange posture and not move. They may stop eating, stop speaking, stop reacting to the world entirely. Here's the eerie part. You can lift their arm and it stays exactly where you left it, frozen in midair. Clinicians call it waxy flexibility. The body becomes something you can pose. It can also swing the other way into agitated, purposeless, repetitive movement that won't stop. For a long time, people assumed catatonia belonged only to schizophrenia. It doesn't. Severe depression can produce it too, and missing that delays the right treatment. The strange mercy is that it often responds dramatically to specific medications, sometimes within hours. A body that was locked can come back. That part still looks like a miracle. Situational depression. Sometimes life hits hard enough that your brain just can't keep up. That's not weakness, that's this. Situational depression, known clinically as an adjustment disorder with depressed mood, is what happens when a specific event knocks you flat. A breakup, a job loss, a death, a move. The trigger is real and you can point straight at it. Here's what separates it from major depression. It's tied to the stressor, and it's meant to fade as you adjust, usually within months. The cause is outside you, not a mystery buried in your own chemistry. That's also the trap. Because there's an obvious reason people refuse to take it seriously. They tell themselves they should be over it by now, so they don't get support for something that responds really well to support. And here's the quiet danger. Situational depression that gets ignored long enough can deepen into the major kind. The thing that started as a reaction can settle in and become the baseline. Pointing at the cause doesn't make it harmless. Treatment-resistant depression. Imagine doing everything right and getting nothing back. That's this one's entire personality. Treatment-resistant depression isn't a separate flavor of sadness. It's a label for depression that refuses to lift after you've tried at least 2 different antidepressants, properly, at the right dose, for long enough. You followed the plan didn't work. Here's how brutal that is. By the time someone reaches this point, they've often spent months or years cycling through medications, each one promising a fix, each one fading. Every failed attempt chips away at the belief that anything ever will. That hopelessness gets misread as just another symptom. Sometimes it's an accurate response to being failed by treatment over and over. But the field finally caught up. Ketamine and its cousin esketamine can work in hours instead of weeks. So can TMS, which uses magnets to wake up underactive brain regions. ECT remains the heavy hitter. Resistant doesn't mean hopeless. It means the easy options are out, and it's time for the real ones. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. Some kids aren't naughty, their brains are running a constant overload, and we used to punish them for it. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder is a childhood diagnosis built around 2 things: a mood that sits angry or irritable almost all the time, and severe temper outbursts that blow far past what the situation calls for, several times a week, for a year or more. Here's why it even exists. For a while, kids like this were getting labeled with bipolar disorder and medicated for it, often wrongly. DMDD was created to give chronic, explosive childhood irritability its own home, so children stopped collecting diagnoses they didn't have. The outbursts are the visible part. The constant background irritability is the real engine. These children aren't happy between explosions. They're simmering all day, every day. And it's exhausting for everyone, which is the trap. The behavior is so disruptive that people treat the child as the problem instead of the illness driving the child. The kid isn't choosing this. The kid is drowning in it. Substance-Induced Depressive disorder. Sometimes the thing you reached for to feel better is the exact thing keeping you down. Substance-induced depressive disorder is depression caused directly by a substance, either by using it or by coming off it. Alcohol is the classic culprit. It's a depressant, so heavy drinking drags mood down over time, even though each drink feels like relief in the moment. Here's the loop. You feel low, you use something to escape it. The substance deepens the low, so you use more. The escape hatch becomes the trapdoor. It's not just illegal drugs or alcohol. Stimulant co-downs flatten people. Withdrawal can trigger it. Even some prescribed medications list depression as a side effect, quietly in the fine print nobody reads. The tell is timing. The depression starts, worsens, or sticks around in lockstep with the substance. Take it out, give it time, and the mood often lifts on its own, which makes diagnosis a detective job. You have to work out whether the brain is sick or just poisoned. Depressive disorder due to another medical condition. Here's the one nobody suspects. Sometimes depression isn't psychological at all. It's a symptom of something physical, and the sadness is just smoke from a different fire. Depressive disorder due to another medical condition is depression caused directly by the physical effects of an illness on the brain. An underactive thyroid can do it. So can Parkinson's, stroke, certain cancers, chronic pain, vitamin deficiencies, and a long list of others. Here's why it gets missed. The person comes in describing classic depression, gets treated for depression, and slowly gets worse because the real driver was never the mind. It was the thyroid the whole time. That's the lesson buried in this entire list. Depression isn't one disease. It's a final common symptom that dozens of very different problems can produce. Same surface, completely different machinery underneath. Which is why getting the type right is everything. The word depression tells you how someone feels. It tells you almost nothing about why. And the why is the only thing that fixes it.